We are now ready to get to our very exciting Disruptive Technology panel. This will take the form of a case study on Uber and Airbnb, two companies who are capturing headlines as some of the controversy and issues play out, and will undoubtedly provide some great insights and lots of discussion. The discussion will be followed by the opportunity to ask questions at the various microphones placed throughout the room. You can also submit them through the mobile app or Twitter at #OCEDiscovery. I am now pleased to announce our panelists. Jeffrey Weschler, the General Manager of Expansion, Uber Canada, and Aaron Zifkin, Country Manager of Airbnb Canada. And also our panel moderator, John Stackhouse, Senior Vice President, Office of the CEO of the Royal Bank of Canada, former Editor-in-Chief of the Globe and Mail, and author of Mass Disruption, 30 Years on the Front Lines of a Media Revolution, which will be available later this year. Please join me in welcoming our panel.
Hey, good afternoon, everyone. Hope you've had a good lunch. Let's start with a question. How many, honestly, in this room have used Uber? Oh, that's pretty good. Pretty good. And Airbnb? Pretty good. Pretty good.
Thank you.
So we thought
That's great.
Some applause too. Why don't we start with just a quick explanation for those who aren't familiar with your companies of
Sure.
how they operate. We'll start with Airbnb.
Sure. So Airbnb is the world's largest global community platform that connects people who are looking for truly authentic local experiences with people who happen to have a little extra room in their home or their entire place. And we're now currently in 34,000 cities and 191 countries as of a couple weeks ago, entering Cuba.
34,000 cities. I didn't know there were that many in the world.
Yeah, I don't think we did either.
Yeah, amazing. And Uber.
So Uber is a technology platform that connects riders and drivers at the press of a button via a smartphone application. And we're available in over 300 cities around the world, including here in Toronto.
Okay. Let's go back to the companies, both of your companies' origins and how they started. Give us a quick sense of what got it going. And maybe you can also speak to whether the founders were trying to solve a problem, or were they just kind of mucking around and they stumbled on something that worked? Maybe
Sure. So our company
was
founded by Travis Kalanick and Garrett Camp. Garrett's actually a Canadian from Calgary. And they were at a conference in Paris, not too dissimilar from this one right here. And they were trying to get a cab late at night, and they had a really hard time. And so they looked to each other and said, well, we both have these effective computers in our pockets. Well, wouldn't it be great if I could just press a button and on demand, I would get a clean, classy ride at my doorstep. So they took that idea back with them to San Francisco, which is where they were both calling home. And they walked the streets and they noticed that there are a ton of empty limousines sitting around for hours and hours on end. And I don't know how familiar people here are with the limousine business, but generally there's the morning clientele or the airport runs and then some evening business runs. But in between, there's a ton of downtime. And so the idea for Uber was simple. Well, what if we could help these people use their time more efficiently and more effectively and generate a new source of income? And that was the birth of Uber in San Francisco with a handful of friends. And from there, we've grown to be in just over 300 cities around the world today.
Great, so problem solved. How about Airbnb?
Well, I would love to tell you a story that is like, our founders were real visionaries and saw a market need. But that just wasn't the case. Unfortunately, they were broke. They needed to make some money, and they were living in San Francisco, and they had $1,000 in their bank account, and the rent was $1,800. It had just gotten up. They just got a notice that it was going up, and so they were being opportunistic, and they thought to themselves, how can we make a couple of bucks fairly quickly? And lucky for them, during that time, there was a design conference, an international design conference that was happening in San Francisco, and all the hotels were full, and so Joe decided to throw a couple of air beds on the floor, and Brian, his partner, Brian Chesky, decided that he would be able to make breakfast, and they were very clever and decided to call it Air Bed and Breakfast. And so that was the genesis of Airbnb. But it really wasn't solving a problem. The problem was that they needed some money.
Well, that can be a problem.
Well, it was a slight problem. And so what they realized where the business was, or what the opportunity was, when 3 individuals actually stayed in their place, they became really great friends. And they saw San Francisco totally like a local. They went to their favorite restaurants and parks, and they had a really authentic experience. And when they left, they hugged each other. It wasn't like a normal checkout. They actually went to one of the guys' weddings a couple years ago over in India. And so they really thought that there was something there was something meaningful there, and that they could bring that to the world.
And then both organizations had hockey stick growth, I'd suggest. What have been the greatest challenges that you've seen in managing that growth? Maybe we can stick with Airbnb and then cut back to Uber.
Well, just to be clear, I mean, the hockey stick was pretty long. I mean, it took these guys a long time before we actually saw growth. It took us almost 4 years to get to 1 million guests, and now we're doing beyond that every single month. So these guys were like cockroaches. They just wouldn't die. They kept it alive. Don't tell them I said that line. But I think probably that the biggest challenge has been the exponential growth and the fact that we are in 34,000 cities. And so we get, I think it's a little bit different from the Uber model where there's more of a sort of a selection of the markets that you enter. We just sort of exploded into all these different markets. And so every single one of our markets, we have to have conversations with people in these markets and understand them and be able to support to make sure that people's first experiences are great. And so I think that was probably our biggest challenge.
Right. And Uber?
I think as you grow on a global scale, maintaining that local feel is really core to what we do and something that we're very focused on. So that's certainly a challenge is how do you grow your business in a market that may be different than your home market, and how do you adapt accordingly? Which I think we've continuously tried to learn from past experiences on how to make that happen as seamlessly as possible.
Can you shed any insights on how that's done? Because I'm sure there's lots of entrepreneurs in the room who have got great things going, but they don't want to let it go. They don't want others to kind of take over the experience or the quality of what they've created. They don't want to let go of their baby. How do you, when you're an entrepreneur and you've suddenly become a global success, how do you let other people sort of take care of your baby?
Well, I think part of it is looking for the personalities that you want to work with ultimately. Finding those smart and talented people that share a vision with you, that want to do and bring to life exactly what you want to do as well. And I think we've been very fortunate at Uber to hire some fantastic people and bring them on board to help execute on that vision.
So hiring is...
Well, it's certainly a piece of it, but understanding how to localize your product to a given market, what product makes sense for that market, as opposed to a broad-scale blanket approach.
Aaron?
So I'd probably build on that. One of our advisors, Peter Thiel, our CEO, said, "What's the one thing as a CEO that I need to do really well?" And he said, "Don't fuck up the culture." That was the only thing. And so our interviewing process is extremely long and arduous, but everybody that is at Airbnb, even though we're scaling so fast, really encompass the ethos and the DNA of the founders. And so it's top of the waterfall and down. The other thing too is, I think, and this isn't specific to Airbnb, but just business in general, I think the idea of going global is a very shiny thing. It's a very shiny object. And so I think it's really important that you really understand your business locally and do it really, really well before you start to build it out. Because those small problems, when you start to scale really fast, become really big problems that are tough to deal with.
What do you do when you don't have it quite perfected and you see others around the world advancing a competitive challenge?
In our particular case, we're just so hyper-focused on the user experience. To be honest with you, we don't really spend a lot of time looking at our competition. We spend a lot of time and our energy focused on making sure that people have the best, authentic, local experiences that they can possibly have.
How would you describe your culture?
It's great. We've actually got 5 core values that we stick to, and it's interesting. I think if you walk into a lot of companies and you sort of see mission statements and core values on the wall, and if you did a survey of the people in the office of how many people could recite them, it would be negligible. I think if you walked around the Airbnb offices, not just in San Francisco, but anywhere over 21 offices around the world, I think you'd probably see a totally inverted ratio. You'd see 9 out of 10 people be able to recite every single one of the core values. One of them I'd say, which I love, is called being a serial entrepreneur, and it's literally like breakfast cereal. The founders were about to run out of money, and they created a box of cereal called Obama-O's during the Democratic National Convention and sold boxes of cereal on eBay to make enough money. That was their seed round of funding, right? So it's really having a culture of people that can just figure it out when there is no playbook, especially when you're blazing trails in a new market.
Not to put you on the spot, but I will. Can you cite the other 4?
So serial entrepreneur, every frame matters, which means we got to be very, very detailed on every aspect of our business. Simplify, which is something that's, I think, it happens really, really fast in a business. You can't really figure things out. You're going to kill me, John.
So you can take a lifeline, and we'll get to...
embrace the adventure.
Yeah.
Embrace the adventure. So you never know what's going to be coming around the corner. How's that for start? I'll remember the fifth by the end.
That's great.
I'll just jump in.
Jeff, how do you describe Uber's
I
Uber's
think
culture?
it's similar in many respects, and core to our culture is maintaining a startup feel and a sense of responsibility no matter where you are in one of the 300 cities around the world. And some of the greatest ideas and innovations have come from city teams that have dreamt up something that impacted them at a local level, and that has grown and scaled to have a global impact. And I think that's really, really fun, first and foremost, but important to continuing improving your business and improving what you offer.
I love the idea that simplify is one of your values, because so many innovators forget about the user experience and to make it simple. Uber is a wonderful case study of that, as is Airbnb. But how do you keep it simple?
Sorry, how do we keep it simple?
How do you keep Uber simple for the user? Because I'm sure there's things being layered on all the time. Your developers probably want to add things that just make it a little too complicated for the user.
Well, I think it comes back to understanding what your users are looking for. And in our example, that's on both sides of the marketplace, both driver partners who choose our platform as a way to generate income for themselves and their family, as well as end users who need a ride at the press of a button. So it's figuring out what do people want and what makes sense. And that's why if you open up the app today, you can split a fare with friends, something that a lot of people want to do. You can drive innovations based on what people are asking for, and that's, I think, one of the core tenets of what we're doing really well is we try to listen to both sides of the equation.
Right. I'd like to talk to you both about and hear you out on some of the resistance you've encountered as your companies have expanded globally, and I'm thinking specifically of government as well as incumbents, entrenched players. How have you managed those conversations, and what have you learned that other entrepreneurs, other disruptors can learn from? The very nature of disruption means someone's going to be put out of place, and governments often don't know how to deal with that. So how do you manage those conversations, both from the policymakers in government and from the competitors or the incumbents who are being disrupted?
So I think, first of all, the challenges are that we have businesses that we have laws that put businesses in a box, and we have laws that put individuals in a box. And now there's this emerging category of individuals as businesses. So it's a new space, and so it takes time and a lot of conversations. Again, we're in 34,000 cities, and these conversations, unfortunately, are not a blanket answer, right? They're not a country by country conversation or a city by city. They actually get down to municipal and the type of structure. So they're very conversations, and they take a long time to have happen. I also think that it's really important in using the correct language as this space emerges. Like, to me, when I hear the word disruptive, it's actually the totally opposite connotation. So I think in the Valley, it's probably a big buzzword, and disruptive usually has a positive connotation, means you're doing something well. But outside of the Valley, disruption has a negative connotation. And in our particular space, it's not a zero-sum game. And I think the media likes to pick up on the hype between the hotels and Airbnb. Mm-hmm. But the reality is that the hotel industry is at their highest occupancy levels that they've ever been in history, with the highest average daily room rate. And so this is really a new segment of travel that is just beneficial to everybody on every level. And so we need to educate people on that. And again, those conversations just take time.
What word do you prefer to disruption?
Innovative.
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 Good. And at Uber, you've had lots of conversations. We've read and seen lots of headlines on them. What have been the lessons?
So I think a lot of what Aaron spoke to is very similar for our business as well. It's about driving the conversation forward and establishing the appropriate dialogue and framework for new and innovative offerings. But the point I don't think that can be lost is that it certainly is growing the pie, and new solutions are offering greater flexibility, new opportunities for earning, as well as new ways for you to explore your city. So that can't be underscored enough, that the pie is effectively growing as a result of new offerings entering these spaces.
It's education. My first conversation, I think it was probably 3 or 4 weeks into starting Airbnb, somebody said, a government official said, so let me get this straight. You want to facilitate complete strangers sharing homes with other people? And I said, yes. And he said, and people are doing this? And I said, yeah, they're doing it. A lot of people are doing this. And so you sort of get those conversations and you explain it, and then it becomes, they understand the scale and the way that it's growing and the experience. So it's one-off conversations that take a lot of time.
And then from that point on, you're able to see the many benefits of what you're offering, right? You're connecting people in your example, and they're having that personal connection, for a night or a week or however long that could be. In our example, it's for the duration of a ride, but those connections can be super impactful. We just had an example in Michigan last week where one of our driver partners was diagnosed with terminal cancer. And the rider in that vehicle heard his story, it resonated with him, and he started a GoFundMe campaign so that this driver partner could retire, spend more time with his family, and not have to worry about leaving his family with any degree of debt. So you're creating new social connections that otherwise don't have a chance. And that's really meaningful and impactful.
Mm-hmm. How do you manage doing that, managing those conversations while you're also trying to grow a business? You just do it?
You try and catch it. You try to obviously prioritize the markets that are, there's sort of a certain pattern that I think every market follows, and you try to identify where certain markets are on the path. So, another great example, in 2012, the London Olympics, and we were having some issues with, the local regulatory environment there. Well, today, actually a few weeks ago, the Queen signed into law a new home sharing law for London. I mean, that's huge advancement. We're now partnering with the Rio Olympics in 2016. So just in 2 years, these types of conversations have evolved to, where they are today.
And we don't even need to look much further than our own province, where the province of Ontario is going to look at the sharing economy and how we can address new and innovative models. So there's a lot of exciting developments that are happening here on the home front as well.
I'd like to seize on that and turn to the broader sharing economy and what Ontario should learn from other places where you've seen sharing work maybe more effectively. What should we be prepared for, and what should we be thinking of doing collectively to take greater advantage?
Well, I think we, as Aaron pointed out, we have a role to play in helping drive the conversation forward. We have the benefit of experience in other places that we can bring to the conversation and bring to that dialogue, whether it's the impact on the broader environment as people share more and more rides, whether it's cars coming off the road and the reductions in congestion. We certainly have a lot more data points today from markets around the world that, in part is our duty to bring forward.
Right. In terms of what a government can do, what would you suggest the Ontario government or the federal government be thinking about?
To be honest with you, I think they're doing it. I mean, we're having great conversations at all levels across the province. They're very engaged with a lot of candor, a lot of transparency. But again, I think a lot of the onus is on us too. We need to be educating them about our business and different markets and what's happening around the world. But so far, it's been very positive.
In one of the introductory remarks, they referred to Toronto being the 6th or 7th greatest center in the world, biggest center for innovation. Yet I was asking you earlier, why is it that Uber and Airbnb were not created in Canada? Could have been somewhere else, and involving Canadians as well.
Well, I think it certainly could have been here. Like I said, our co-founder was from Calgary. One of our first engineers is from Calgary as well. So it certainly can, and I wouldn't be surprised if there's someone sitting in this room today with that next idea.
There's some microphones here if that person wants to come up. We actually are going to have some questions in about 5 minutes, both by mic and by screen. But
again, I don't see any reason why it couldn't be here. I think we've got some incredible companies right now that are coming up that are making a lot of noise on the global stage. But again, I think a lot of it has to do with the funding too, and the funding environment, the ecosystem that we have here, just supporting our young entrepreneurs.
The funding system is lacking here. Is that what you're?
And of course the brain drain. It is frustrating to go down to San Francisco and see we've got a great Canadian contingent at headquarters. Right? It'd be great to see that talent come back home.
What do we need to keep more people here and maybe more critically generate more early stage investment?
Yeah, I think we're doing it now. I think we're seeing a much stronger sort of ecosystem springing up. There's a lot more of these incubators that are popping up, and we're seeing a lot more of these groups coming together. And I think probably mentorship is probably the biggest Achilles heel right now. When you look down in the valley, I mean, there are Y Combinator, these type of accelerator programs. They come in with so much money and so much mentorship and introductions that they can provide. It's just on another level right now. But Canada and Ontario specifically, we're seeing a lot more of them spring up right now.
And how does the talent pool here compare to other areas where both your organizations are working?
I think it's fantastic. I've had the pleasure and privilege of meeting and interacting with really talented, bright, motivated people. So I think there's a ton of potential here in Toronto and across the country.
But if you're talking to heads of universities or colleges, what would you suggest they're missing to make the talent pool even better?
I think university, from my experience, provided me with a foundation to go on and do something beyond that. But I think it comes down to the individual and what they're after. Going into a startup environment or starting your own business or going out on your own isn't for everyone, and that's totally cool. But it's finding what gets you excited, what gets you out of bed ready to go and seize the day. And if the startup world is what you're after, then I think there's a lot of great opportunities here in Toronto or Ontario more broadly.
This is totally anecdotal. This is sort of my perspective of joining Airbnb. But what I see at Airbnb are a lot of mutts. I see a lot of people that come from a very eclectic background. And I think in school we sort of get this programming of here's the ladder, here's the path, when in fact it's totally the antithesis now, especially in the tech space, where you want people that are dynamic, that have a huge range of background from entrepreneur to MBA programs to being in the finance sector. You want that dynamic person that can just figure it out and be wildly curious. I think that's the thing that we're missing here.
We have a delegation here from China, and I wanted to get your thoughts on what you're seeing more broadly from Asia that both inspires and worries you in terms of competitive challenges.
So I mean, what's inspiring for us is obviously just the sheer size. I mean, they're the #1 outbound travel market, and that's accelerating faster than anybody else. I mean, the delta between first and second in the total addressable market is just ginormous. So it's a huge opportunity. The challenges, which I don't think are insurmountable, are just, again, educating yourself in the market. One, I think from a product standpoint, there are some barriers. When you look at China, for example, Facebook and Google, and some of the barriers. Well, our platform largely depends on Google Maps and Facebook integration and all that type of stuff. So those have been challenges. And second, I'd probably say cultural challenges, right? The idea of, in our particular case, sharing your home and the type of space that is available are very different than North America or Europe.
Mm-hmm. And for Uber?
Yeah, I think it's a tremendously exciting opportunity, and one of our focuses is again maintaining that local feel as we expand to more and more locations around the globe. So it's understanding, what does our product need to look like in that specific market in order to resonate. So I think that's really exciting more than anything else.
Let's open it up to the floor. As I said, there's three microphones. If you want to wave, there's someone who can signal. And we also, please tweet your questions and we can read them on a monitor here. But while people sort of summon the courage or figure out what they're going to ask, let me also ask you both to share your own thoughts about your own leadership journey. A lot of young entrepreneurs just starting out here. What advice can you share for them in terms of how you've managed your careers?
I think what's been most valuable to me is just staying flexible throughout, and especially as when I joined Uber, it was a small company of 50 employees around the world, and it's grown dramatically to date. But the role that I'm in today is one that didn't exist 6 months ago, and the role that I'll likely fulfill one day won't exist then. So I think flexibility has been extremely valuable.
Right, Aaron?
I think there's a huge difference between being an entrepreneur and somebody who has the entrepreneurial spirit. And when you look at entrepreneurs and the leaders of some of these startups, they're invincible. They just go for it, and they think so big and they move so fast. And so it's that resilience and just figuring out a way when there isn't a playbook to get there.
That's great. Okay, we've got a question at mic number 2.
Hi, my name is Ahmad from TechWorthy. First of all, I'd like to congratulate you on the success Uber and Airbnb have been making in the world. It's quite remarkable. So it's more than a request than a question. I'd like to actually hear more about the innovation that Uber and Airbnb have been doing. So we hear that Uber has been working on a driverless car. So I'm wondering if you can maybe talk a little bit more about that, and also maybe if we can also hear from Airbnb.
Everyone's under an NDA here, right?
Yeah, you all signed your NDA coming in, but accepting that, yeah, let's hear about the the driverless car.
What I can talk to is innovations that I've been privy to and know about. And quite frankly, one of those that is most exciting to me is this whole idea of Uber Pool, whereby if I'm in a similar location as you or within reasonable proximity, and we're going to a similar destination, our rides are matched, and we can share that ride. And what that effectively does is drive down the cost for the consumer as the rider, and it actually increases the trip length for the driver. So the economics work out for everybody. And that's really meaningful because the whole notion of urban carpooling is something that we've been trying to tackle for decades. It's shown up in time and time again in different documents, different talks. And now technology is finally at a place where we can actually start to see this type of innovation, which in a city like Toronto where congestion is such a problem, will have a real tangible benefit if and when that arrives.
I actually just tried it in San Francisco last week. It was the most fun commute I've had since like carpooling in elementary school. It was great. So our innovation, I would say, is we know that we are part of the accommodation component of somebody's trip, and we will be and will continue to be more focused on the entire trip journey. So thinking about things like, experience, restaurants, sort of lighting up our hosts and giving them those real authentic experiences, figuring out how we can support that more.
Great. Over to number one, please.
Hi there, my name is Shah Rashid. I'm a business student at University of Toronto. First off, huge thanks for coming out. I actually have personal experiences with both Uber and Airbnb, and all I can say, it's a huge difference between traditional routes. I mean, when I stayed over in Ottawa for $40, I had a whole house, and the guy gave me towels, and it was great. So my question is actually for Aaron, and it is, can you talk a little bit about the security issues? Because 34,000 cities, it's a huge spectrum. So say I want to travel to somewhere, that's not the same level of security, a developing country. What kind of responsibility does Airbnb have? And then what kind of risks do I have, going in?
So just to be clear, our security levels are the same all around the world. So that's the first, the platform is the same right across. Just to be clear, we had on our business night in 2014, we had 550,000 people stay in each other's homes in 190 countries. And so really the first line of security, without a doubt, is the community itself, people leaving reviews. And so for the first time ever, you actually now have people, just as a consumer, are evaluating the host as well as the hosts are now evaluating the guest. So that's the first line. We also have on our platform verified identification. And so nobody on our platform is anonymous. So everybody has to actually scan their identification to make sure it corresponds with their terrestrial address. So we actually know who people are. And lastly, we now have a team of over 150 people in trust and safety that are proactively working over the marketplace.
Right. Thanks. Let's go to number three.
Is it on? Okay. Vijay Kadadi, Vic Ventures. Thanks for this very inspiring talk, first of all. I was also quite positively surprised. No, let's say I was inspired by the synchronicity of your looks. You two, you're very similar.
We both started with a full head of hair before we started this job.
It's called the sharing economy.
I'm there with you, with three. So my question is, what are some of the fields, some of the areas that you think have not yet been discovered or conquered by the sharing economy, and that are basically next in line, that would be the next big thing to be conquered by the sharing economy? And what are some of the things that would happen, maybe infrastructural, technological, for that to be possible?
The two big ones that pop out to me are food and education. I think those are going to be big areas. I think they've got some complexities around them, but I think the idea of people sharing experiences and sort of democratizing education are going to be huge.
I've seen a lot about education, but can you talk a bit more about food? What do you see?
So we're seeing, we've tried a couple of programs where people actually share, basically have dinner parties in their home. And so, people traveling on Airbnb, they don't want to go to a restaurant necessarily, they want to meet somebody that's local and have a great meal for an affordable price. They can go into somebody else's home. That's just one iteration of it.
Right.
Yeah, I think anytime you see latent capacity or an underutilized asset or opportunity, then that's probably ripe for some sort of innovation. So I think you probably walk down the street and you'll get hit with the next idea, or if you're at the barber like me, maybe that's it.
Got a question here on the screen from the app that asks, what's the most interesting thing you've learned from users that you wouldn't have known before joining your company? Aaron, do you want to try that one? What have you learned from users in your Airbnb experience?
Yeah, I think more than anything, it's not about the technology. It's ultimately about the offline real-world experience. In our case, I think we've seen in the last 20 years that technology has really connected people around the world, but really it's actually disconnected people. And the idea of the city, the village, right, and not being a global city, but being a part of your local city, is a notion. So we find that our users, what they're looking for, what they're craving for, is not necessarily better technology, but really authentic experiences.
I think that beyond that, users often have an opportunity to influence what products you deliver. I don't know if we necessarily always think that way, but one example that comes to mind is, in New York City, there's a product offering we have called Uber Rush, which is effectively an on-demand courier service. And that product developed as a result of how people were using our platform. And by learning from your users what they're looking for, how they're using your platform, you're able to deliver something new and novel that caters exactly towards what they're looking for.
Back to number 2.
Hi. Thanks for both of you for your inspiring stories. I think one of the big things that, especially with Airbnb and Uber, is that you really created a lot of value in 2 really established markets. And just my question is in regards to when you're starting a business like this in 2 really established markets, the hotel industry and the taxi industry, and you really have a novel concept where people get excited about the idea and it gives you traction to go out there and really pitch the idea. One of the big things is when it comes down to like pen to paper, people start seeing the pitfalls in your idea, and it's about pushing through and really trying to convince them that this is a great idea, and you're convincing them that you're creating value for the city, for whoever's going to be using your service. So what are some tips that you can give, or some experiences that you've had where you've kind of run into a roadblock or a wall and you really have to change the conversation or convince someone that you're creating value in a really established industry in a novel way?
All right, thank you.
So I think part of telling that narrative and telling your story is data can support that, certainly, but it's understanding who you're talking to, and it's like any conversation or any relationship that you've built over time. Not everybody resonates to the same points in the same way. So if we sat down for a coffee, you and I, and we learned a little bit more about each other, the things that I'd want to tell you about our company and what I see as the value proposition may be different at the start versus the end of that conversation.
I think if you ask Brian, Joe, and Nate, who are our founders, like what if their idea of like having strangers share each other's homes around the world would have worked, Airbnb wouldn't be here today. One of the best stories that they tell is the first investor story. They went to a coffee shop, the guy was drinking a smoothie, they were telling them the story about Airbnb and what they wanted to do, and the guy literally finished his smoothie, got up, and walked out the door. Brian and Joe were looking at each other like, is the guy going to the washroom or paying his like parking? The guy never came back, right? But they kept going, right? And so you just got to have ruthless tenacity.
Right. A slightly related question for you, Aaron, from Twitter, from CBH Brock. How do you solve the problem of ensuring hosts' credibility before they're listed?
Yeah. So the first thing is obviously the platform itself. So we have verified identification, as I mentioned before. We also have probably 5 or 6 other ways that people can verify their identity. So they can link their LinkedIn accounts, their Facebook accounts, their Gmail accounts, verify their phone number. So you sort of get a certain level of credibility. You can also get friends and family to leave references as well in the absence of having people review their first stay.
Great. Back to number 1, please.
Hello. Hi. I just wanted to say I'm the biggest fan of Airbnb and Uber. I've been using Airbnb for years, and it's my favorite company ever, and just, of course, Uber. I guess my question is for Aaron. I was wondering, how was Airbnb able to launch in Cuba, given the very limited internet access. Maybe 2% of the population have even bank accounts. So I was wondering if you can just let us know how you did it.
I wish I had a better answer for you. I wasn't working on that one, but I know that Airbnb was working very closely with the State Department on a lot of this stuff.
Thank you.
But I'm happy to chat with you later if I can find out any information for you.
Yeah. A not dissimilar question from Betty G on Twitter. How do you acquire your first buyers and sellers in the market? And then how do you achieve viral growth? But yeah, those first customers, classic challenge.
Yeah, I mean, I remember telling friends and family that I was going to work at Uber and tried to explain to them, what a black car is, right? The notion of a black car or limousine in the Toronto marketplace at the time wasn't something that was common. And the idea of getting a limousine at the tap of a button, everybody seemed to think they were going to get a stretch limousine, show up at their office or home, and couldn't justify it. So I think the first few people were always long conversations, drawn out conversations, but I think the magic of our platform is when you get to experience for yourself. So that first time you open up the app, you're able to see in real time where the car is, how it's approaching you, get the driver's information, you're able to contact them. That first experience and first initial touch point is what really allows you to feel and experience the difference.
Does it help, presumably it does, to get opinion leaders in different communities to try what you're doing and then talk about it? And do you have to go out and target those people, or do you just hope it happens organically?
Yeah, they certainly help, but I think to answer this question, if there was an equation, there'd be a lot more people running very successful marketplaces. It's a very tough thing to get that flywheel going. The one piece of advice that we always constantly go back to is it's better to have 100 people that love you than 1,000 people that think you're okay. Right? So really sort of over-rotate on that first cohort that you have.
Of 100 people who love you rather than 1,000 who think you're okay.
Yeah.
That's a fantastic line. Let's number 3, you've been very patient. Thank you.
Hi there, Julian from My Health Sphere. Both of your company's brands are among the strongest in the world, especially in the world of disruptive technologies. And I think that's in large part to your company's ability to use customers as champions of your brand. What is the key aspect in your models that allows you to do that? And what are some other examples in today's market of companies that can accomplish that?
So I think consumers have been advocates for us on both sides, both the drivers that use our platform as well as the riders, because they see the benefit to it right away, how it impacts their day-to-day lives. So that's sort of first and foremost is when you have that connection with somebody because of the way that, or a brand because of the way it impacts your life in a positive manner, then certainly you're able to go out and advocate more wholeheartedly than otherwise.
For us, it's very clear. We are truly a community-driven super brand. That's what we're aspiring to be. Our goal is that we can make anyone anywhere in the world feel like they truly belong there. And so we are obsessed with the idea that we don't want people to just be staying in a house, which is a bunch of walls and a roof. We want people to be staying in a home. So everything that we do, all of our marketing, all of our product iteration, all of our community outreach is focused on that.
Right. We've got just a couple of minutes left, so just quickly, number 2, please.
Hi, I'm JJ Tang. I'm here with Capture Canada, and I think this question is more directed towards Jeffrey. So, I hate to play the devil's advocate here or anything, but Uber, and I'm sure everyone here knows that it's been under fire by local cab companies and cab drivers themselves. Not only are you cutting into their market share, but they're also complaining you're putting the riders at risk. So they're saying you're not following the same safety regulations, same licensing, and that's just making it more dangerous. So I just wanted to know, how would you go ahead and mitigate these risks?
So on the safety front, first and foremost, we're committed to safety on our platform. And in many respects, we bring a lot of the same features that Airbnb has. But first and foremost, there's never an anonymous transaction. So you know who your driver is, and your driver knows who you are on the platform. There's always a record associated with every trip, when it's taking place. Every driver on our platform undergoes a background check and a motor vehicle records check, which is often more thorough than what's being done at the local level. So that's first and foremost. But we're not going to stop there, and we are committed to bringing new features to our platform. And recently, have launched in several markets an SOS feature for in-app. But you're also available here today in Toronto to share your ETA with friends and family so that they know exactly when you're going to arrive. To your other point, what we are seeing is that new people are coming into the market and using our platform that otherwise wouldn't be looking at Uber or traditional taxi or traditional limousine. What we're finding is that our platform is fitting in quite nicely with the multimodal way that people want to explore their city. So one day you're going to decide, I'm going to take the TTC. One day you're going to decide, hey, I'm going to ride my bike or walk or use Uber or use a taxi. And it really fits together quite nicely.
Thank you. I think we've got time for one last question over at number one. If you could make it very brief, please.
Sure. So I'm a big Uber fan, and I've got friends and family that actually drive UberX a lot. Awesome. But one of the main concerns that they have is police are actually boarding vehicles and issuing tickets as well if they get caught in an accident and the insurance company finds out that they're an UberX driver, their insurance policies get canceled. So they're very concerned about this. What do you say to these UberX drivers so that they remain on the road?
We're committed to our partners, and I think that's an important piece of it. We're committed to our partners and supporting them throughout, and that's in every city and market where we operate. In addition, every ride on our platform is covered. So, what I would say is if your friends or family who are on our platform have any questions, they know where to find us. They can send us a note, get in touch, and we're happy to have those conversations because that's our responsibility, quite frankly.
Right on the buzzer. Well, that was a buzzer beater. So thank you both so much. As you were talking, I was thinking back to a chart I saw at YouTube the other day that showed organizations' journey from what they call awareness to passion. And organizations, some of them have a lot of brand awareness, and some have great passion. And I think we've seen today that your awareness for both of you is actually above what we were talking about before, but the passion here, people willing to speak about your brand, defend it, some attack it, is also really impressive and a great inspiration to all the innovators in the room to strive for awareness and passion. But thank you both for your time, and to the audience for thanks as well.